That was actually part of how I originally started Wellness Mama, was when my oldest was a newborn, reading that statistic. The study was reported in Time magazine that said for the first time in 2 centuries, the current generation of American children will have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. And I'm right there with you. That's not good enough for my kids. That's not good enough for anybody's kids. Our kids deserve better, and I think we are going to change that. I think we are going to see shifts. And I think the presence is so powerful. And the beauty of this, especially for any of the moms listening, in a really profound way, moms, I feel like, set the nervous system tone for the whole house.
Hello, everyone. My extremely excited Vibe community. I know you are as excited as I am to be able to spend time and share space with herself, Katie Wellness Mama. I am so honored to have gotten to know her personally, and as a follower of hers for as long as I've followed anybody, she has been such a resource for me of light, of foundational truths and practical application, and really walks her walk. And when I had the opportunity to meet her last year, I was completely validated how beautiful of a heart she has, how beautiful and big her spirit is. And I'm so excited to have this conversation. So welcome to the flow. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that. That was a beautiful introduction. I'm grateful.
Well, you are a true light in this world of ours. So there's so many things you could talk about in regards to foundational wellness and how that you've been doing this. When did you start your podcast? Like 2006 or something crazy like that?
I started the blog in 2006, and the podcast is this year going to have both its 10-year anniversary and its 1,000th episode.
Bravo, lady. And so if you're not a follower of Katie, please go watch her. If you're a mom or not a mom, go watch Katie, because we're all moms. We're moms of ourselves. We're moms of this earth. We're moms of each other. And that's the type of content. And she also interviews the most amazing people on her podcast and is a great interviewer. And I just love how your podcast rolls. So go follow Katie if you don't already. So in all your years, I want to get to like our industry a little bit and talk about that. But what would be for you in a perspective of this biohack versus biolove? That's where I want to start. Now, my community knows the word hack language means a lot to me because we're all spell givers. We're all witches at some level. And we got to be very aware of the words we use because it's a vibration. Even though I'm part of the Biohack Yourself documentary, there's a part of me that and even talked about it like, can we call it biolove? What is your thoughts, feelings, and knowings, if you will, Katie, share with me about biohack in this industry of which we find ourselves?
I love that we're starting here, and I'm very much in alignment with you. It was a journey. I have not always probably had that mentality, especially when it comes to the health and wellness world. For anybody who's heard my story or my journey, I had Hashimoto's. I no longer do. But in, first of all, trying to figure out what was going on and then trying to help my body reverse what was going on, I went through a very long process where I was very much in the cognitive and in the what would be considered biohacking in the true sense of the word, with the spreadsheets of supplements and trying all the crazy therapies, thinking that something was wrong with my body that I could externally fix. And the beautiful part of the journey was actually learning to embrace my body and work with it. And I think that's where that nuance comes in with the word, because hacking often either means getting into something we're not meant to, or having to fix something that has a bug that's broken. And I feel like neither of those are true. Our bodies are never broken. They're always on our side. They're always striving to be in the best health possible. And it's the friendship, the learning to work with them. And so I love that you call it bio love. I've said bio embrace or bio connecting, but I feel like anytime we can work with the body's already natural process that's happening, we're going to have better results. And I think that stems both from our language and from the way we approach that. I know for me, a lot shifted when I learned to come from a place of self-love versus a place of trying to fix what was broken. And at one point during that healing journey, I came across the quote that said, "I said to my body, I want to be your friend." And it took a deep breath and said, "I've been waiting our whole life for this." And I felt like that met me where I was at that moment of I had to learn. It wasn't an overnight thing, but I had to learn not to hack my body, but to become friends with it. And then I started to notice how much wisdom it had and how everything that we label as symptoms or words we're given as diagnoses, that's simply our body actually speaking loudly enough for us to hear and trying to give us very clear messages. And if we learn how to listen, for me at least, it was a much shorter path to finding the things that were going to be the most helpful for healing. when I just started learning to listen and work with my body. And I know that sounds simplistic. And I also know the appeal of wishing there had been a silver bullet or one supplement or one device or one therapy that was going to fix everything. But I think that the beauty is in the contrast, and life so much is in the nuance of the details. And I'm so grateful in hindsight for that journey because it helped sort of turn everything on its head. And I had to relearn that relationship with my body. And I hope it also gave me perspective and understanding in some ways. Just like I kind of related to when I had my first two kids, I was very much the natural birthing mom, and I was never going to have medication. I would never even read the sections in books about C-sections because I was like, I'm never going to do that. And then with my third, I had placenta previa that wasn't caught, and I hemorrhaged at 35 weeks and medically died. He was in the NICU for a long time, and I had to have a C-section, and it saved my life. And that was a moment of realizing a whole perspective and hopefully a little bit of humility that I didn't have before in my space of judgment about moms who would have a C-section. And it was kind of life's great way of teaching me a hard lesson in a beautiful way. So I think it all goes back to that working with versus hacking into or trying to force. It's the listening, the gentle awareness, and that small, subtle voice versus trying to externally control or exert power.
That was gorgeous, beautiful, and so much. And I appreciate that perspective so much. I would love to dive into one part of it huge part of it. In order for the self-love, you got to let go of the judgment. I don't know about you, sister, but that judgment cord was freaking deep and entangled and like an octopus, and wasn't just about my self-care, but how I related to others, how I related to my child, how I related to the family I come from. And I know you've been through some family transitions over the course of your career as well. And you know me, I get real personal real fast. So if I ask you something you don't want to answer, Katie, sorry, you decided to be on my podcast and you knew what you were getting yourself into. But in all honesty, I'm sure through that journey of getting your health back and unwinding that judgment and that self-care, because I know in where we're at astrologically, there's a lot of people at a pinnacle point in relationships. And I know that we could help them with vulnerability and sharing what we have all been through. That's how we learn. It's how we hold each other. If you'd be willing to just share how that self-love and untangling that self-judgment allowed you to shift dynamics in not just your physical body, but your emotional and your mental and your spiritual body, because as we know, it's all the levels, right? Would you mind sharing a little bit of that journey with us?
I'm happy to. And I think you're right. That was another thing I found through the journey, was that while the physical things are, of course, important and they're very complementary and they all work together, until I addressed the emotional and the spiritual and the inner experience, none of the things that I was doing to support the physical body were able to actually take root. And it's easy to look back and try to give it a clinical explanation of saying, oh, I can see now in hindsight that after being sexually assaulted in high school, I built emotional safety walls that led to patterns of caretaking, that led to patterns of people pleasing, that in hindsight, I didn't have that knowledge at the time. I would probably do things differently if I could redo it, but maybe not, because there was beautiful lessons in that as well. And I can look back and see I can take full responsibility for the patterns that I created in my marriage at the time, in my life, of people pleasing, of doing everything for everyone, because I felt unsafe if everyone around me wasn't happy and taken care of. But my blind spot was I didn't extend that to myself. And for me, it took reaching a point of truly almost a nervous breakdown to realize there is also the variable of me as a person in this equation. And I've been ignoring that one for a long time. So in just full vulnerability, another area I certainly had judgment about was anybody who had been through a divorce or the breakup of a relationship, because I came from a very religious background. That was something that was completely off the table. And so going through that was excruciating and also beautiful and very much a learning process. And for me, I don't think this is true for everyone. I think there's a million different ways that we can heal and a million different ways that will exhibit in our relationships. For the relationship I was in, when I started having boundaries at all, or making time for self-care at all, or expecting that there could be equal contribution in the relationship, or all kinds of things, it disrupted those patterns that I had created for all those years with people pleasing and caretaking. And the relationship ended up transitioning, and it was definitely a painful experience, but also in a strange way, like a blissful learning experience. Because I think when we're in those moments of such intensity, we and our emotions are so raw, we're able to learn things in a way that we might not otherwise. And it helped kind of like break open all of those emotional walls I had put in for so long. And when I say I had like locked down emotions, I can look back and say that moment of assault was so intense that I subconsciously made the decision that I never wanted to feel helpless again. Because as much as the physical part of that experience was painful, it was the feeling of helplessness and not having any autonomy of my own body or being able to say no and it mean anything. And that helplessness was so painful. So I built all of these elaborate systems in my life and everywhere to never have to feel helpless again. Now, the cool thing is those things actually helped in business and helped with getting things dialed in and having good logistics. And the great thing about healing is we don't lose the good parts when we choose to heal. I still am able to run systems and I'm still able to keep things organized, but I can do it now from a place of less compulsion and more balance and love. But for me, and I don't think this is true for everyone, to me that led to the end of a relationship, of my marriage. And it was an intensely painful process, but also a beautiful one. And I know at one point he was so upset and like, totally understandably, he didn't understand everything that was going on and why I was having these changes and why what had been the status quo for 15 years was no longer the case. And he got so upset and he asked me like, is there someone else? Like, what is wrong with you? And I responded, it surprised me what came out of my mouth. I said, yeah, for the first time in my whole life, there's me. And so it was a very intense journey and one I'm still, I think, in some ways healing from, but also already so grateful for.
Thank you for bearing that. I feel like so many of us thinking, no, we could have filled in our name. Where are you at within the journey? How does the other person that you're in a vibrational relationship with going to be able to respond to your changing your frequency? And are they going to be able to meld with you? Or does it make such a contrast for them that they're not able to stay in that and to have no judgment over that person? And what I love about watching that experience from a distance was the consciousness and the deep awareness that you brought for your community, for your children, for him, for yourself, ideally and mostly, right? And I so appreciate you mentioning and bringing light to the fact that it was about the relationship with you. You know, as we're recording this, I'm connected to Sound of Soul, knowing that Katie's done a Sound of Soul with me. And so I asked her if it was okay to entangle our hearts together today so we would remain in our hearts, because this is deep stuff and it's not easy. And it makes it easier when you feel vulnerable, when you're connected in your hearts, and we're all connected. And Katie and I met and it was like, oh, there you are, like heart space, like just knew what each other were really about. And I also want to speak to the length of time you've been doing this, because I know so many people on their journeys, men and women, it doesn't matter who's listening to this, you've been where she's been at, where you could fill my name in for everything she said, by the way, every single thing. And 90% of the clinical clients that I work with fill in the blank. Where are they at within that journey of realizing that the patterns we've created that no longer serve us, that created all these dysfunctional relationships, that as we thaw that out and we rewire them, sometimes it fires the person on the other end and they can't tolerate it anymore. And that's okay. And this didn't happen overnight. She started her blog in 2006. We're recording this in 2024. And I know the listeners but I've been taking all the things. I'm doing the cold baths. I'm doing the dry brushing. I'm doing her lymph pumping. I'm maybe even doing my fascia. I'm taking all my supplements. I've done my detoxes. I've done my parasite protocols. I've done the infrared sauna. I meditate. What else have they done? Oh, the IVs. They've gotten their amalgams out. They've treated their scars, perhaps even. What else have they done?
Oh my gosh, there's I remember writing a blog post years ago of all the weird things I had done in the name of health, from all I had done the stem cells and the PRP and like the hormones and worked with every doctor and been on every protocol. And I think, like I said, I think there's beautiful wisdom in all of that. And I think
Absolutely.
we can learn something from it. And I think supporting our body physically is super important. But to your point, there is also a deeper layer. And I think, like you mentioned, language is also so important. And so whether it's in the health space or whether it's in the relationship space, like I just talked about, I think it, to me, goes back to like curiosity and responsibility. And I love the word responsibility. I talk about this with my kids a lot because when we break it down, it actually means response, ability to respond. And when we think of it that way, I want to have 100% responsibility in every area of life, which also then helps to step back from the blame or the fault or even the reasons, and to hopefully approach things from, that Walt Whitman quote, but from curiosity, not judgment. And I think that even that reframe makes such a big difference. And I know this touches into the realm of the woo a little bit, and me of 10 years ago would have probably rolled my eyes at this idea to begin with. But I do think that the energetic, spiritual, and emotional layer can be so profoundly impactful to the physical body as well. And so I even encourage people to sort of do an audit of our internal dialogue. Because when I look back, the time when I was trying to heal and not getting results, my story in my head was that I was sick, I have Hashimoto's, my body is attacking itself, and even just those very basic languages that were kind of tracks running on repeat in my head don't serve the body, the mind, the spirit in any way.
And they're not truth.
They're not true.
Truth.
Exactly. My body was not attacking itself. It was using the best of everything it had to try to heal. And it was giving me what I called a symptom as a message in that healing response. And I wasn't sick. And when I learned to very slowly, I was a slow learner at this, but just start to reframe the inner language I was using instead of I am sick to I am healing, or I am well, or every day I thrive more and more, or my body is healing itself. Just those inner shifts, it was like my body started listening and it caught up. And I know that's not quantifiable and you can't do that in a biohacking lab, but I think there's something incredibly profound when we start to cultivate that relationship with our inner dialogue, because that is sort of the software that our body is running on. And when we can make changes at the software level, the hardware catches up much more easily than if we try to change the hardware and force the software to update.
Oh, Katie, thank you so much for saying that. You just gave me great, like I always say, we're the divine having a physical experience, right? We're energy having a masculine experience, or however you want to look at it. But software versus hardware is so great. The software runs it, but the hardware is how it behaves, how the software just drives the hardware to behave in a certain way, right? And this comes back to my concept that I try to teach people: be versus do. And so you can do all the right things, and you had mentioned it part of your story, like you were doing all the right things, but you weren't being present to the inner dialogue. You weren't being and it's not easy to start with. Is it easy, Katie, to start it?
No, it's excruciating at times and difficult and frustrating, and you feel like you're running into a wall. And the great thing is those moments are also awesome teachers, because I learned too of having been all those years in what would have been a fight or flight nervous system response and never shifting into parasympathetic. Those moments of frustration actually were a great teacher in learning how to let the emotions that needed to process through the body in a state of fight or flight process, also to access the more of the calm and the states that needed that freeze response. I learned to sort of respect what my body was asking for, because it's the hardware. It's just our software running that experience, but it's still the hardware we live in. It's still important. And I feel like when we have clear communication between the two, sort of the best results happen.
And on that next level, I want to mention that what you really talked about was that you took control over the software, and you started to direct the software versus the software directing you. And that's because there's three parts of us. There's the physical, the emotional, mental, but it's being watched by the spirit, right? And so the spirit is watching you, or you're the spirit rather, watching your mind, your emotional body, and your physical body. And what you were able to control was consciously go, hey, stop running that old program. That's not true. I don't have an autoimmune disease. I have a self-healing body. That is done. Okay, I mean, I don't really want to end the podcast, but stop, pause, rewind, listen to that again. There is no such thing as Kelly Kennedy is saying this, not Katie Wells. Kelly Kennedy is saying this. There is no such thing as an autoimmune disease. It is a self-healing body. If we had an autoimmune disease, we would die. We wouldn't have evolved in a physical way, because it has to heal itself. But that's the divinity healing, and it's not mechanistic, it's vitalistic. And it is this being part of us that does stuff that we have to be conscious of. And when we start to take conscious control over it, it eventually gets to be where you don't have to be so conscious about it. Do you feel like that's changed? Like, it's really hard in the beginning. Wouldn't you agree? And do you feel it's as hard as it was?
No, I think as the software switches, it's kind of like the idea of a flywheel, if anyone's familiar with the concept. That's like sort of in physics, it's a thing that generates more power but it's really, really hard to start. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to begin the process of the flywheel, but after it starts gaining momentum, it contributes to its own momentum, and eventually you can run it with one hand very gently and give water to a whole village. I feel like it's the same here, but I don't want to, detract from the fact that it does take some pretty substantial effort at first, but then it does get so much easier, and it profoundly, for me at least, shifted the physical experience as well. I will also echo what you said. I don't believe that autoimmune disease, as we talk about it in traditional medicine, exists because, like you said, if our body wanted to kill us, it could do it in under a second. Our body is always on our side, and it's trying to heal. And if we can just learn to have that relationship and working with it instead of against it, that process can be much quicker. But I think the spiritual, the mental, emotional side is such a big, and for me, very overlooked piece of that for so many years. And I think when we give space for that as well, the physical shifts too. And just for context for people, when I was in that state of saying I had Hashimoto's and thinking my body was attacking itself, there was a point when I could only eat 4 foods without reacting to them. I was so tired that I would fall asleep in front of my door so my kids couldn't go running in traffic. But I could not stay awake for the whole day. I was so tired. And again, it took effort. It wasn't an overnight thing. But all of those things resolved, and I now can eat essentially everything. I still don't eat things like vegetable oils and gluten, but it's not because I have a bad reaction if I do. I just prefer to eat more nourishing foods. I don't have to avoid EMS as if they were the plague. I don't feel completely fatigued for 3 days if I go on an airplane. Like all of those things started to work themselves out. The physical expression caught up with the inner experience when I started letting them both have space to exist.
I want everybody to breathe and hear truly what she just said. Thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly what my experience is too. And that's why we connected when we did, because it was the universe going, there's 2 people in flow state. Now let's go share this with the world of how we actually are supposed to live divinely in a human experience. We're divine beings having a human experience. And this goes back to, I want to bio-love it. I want to understand the symptoms. And I can shift my gear out of the sympathetic fight, flight. I can be conscious of my programming and go, it's okay to be safe. I can communicate. I'm smart enough. I'm divine enough. And I can unconditionally love that person, whoever it is, and respond appropriately to them, because I have the ability to respond and to regulate, as I would say, to compensate for any stressor without it pushing on me. And I talk about a cage that we all put ourselves in a physical way, and that it's spiritual, trapped in this physical cage. And the flow work I do helps assist and facilitate that. And I broke my left elbow 10 weeks ago before recording this. And I just got back from working with my good friend, Deanna Hansen. And I really feel like I've been saying to the universe for, 2 years, I want somebody to do for me what I do for others. Because I physically needed it worked out. Like I had done all the other work. I just needed somebody to get me out of my physical cage, because I was so good at helping other people get out of their cage. And I feel, honestly, so incredibly different because I finally got out of my cage. And that says a lot for everybody. I feel calmer, which everybody's probably going to be excited about, than I ever have in my life, because I feel like I don't have to race anymore. And for the first time, and this is what's big for me, as I stand here, typically when I stand here, so I've done all the other work and catching up to the physical work, funny enough, because I'm a physical body worker, I always had to tell my body consciously, pull your shoulders back, put your hips over your knees, put your knees over your ankles, stand there like this. And now I'm finding, as I've been doing this whole podcast this morning, because it was just yesterday I came home, my body is making all these adjustments. I'm not conscious about any of it. And then I become conscious and I assist it and facilitate it more. And I'm finding, as we're talking, that's exactly what's going to happen, that we'll have the perfect alignment when we do all the physical unwinding and we open up all this physical stuff, is what you're saying, because the emotional work catches up to the physical. And there's many layers to that as we continue to go through this wonderful journey called life, and to enjoy all of it. The contrast, the breaking of the elbow. If I didn't break my elbow, I never would have experienced what I did, because I wouldn't have been desperate enough to fly to Winnipeg, Canada in the middle of their freaking winter, to handle a broken elbow from ice, to go stand in the ice channels of the North Sea I felt like I was in, to be unwound, because you got to enjoy the contrast. Like, I'm giggling about the fact that I'm literally staring at an ice river, having fallen on ice, being afraid of ice, being unwound from the fall. That's funny crap. And I would like to say, not only does it get easier, it does get fun. Are you having fun, Katie?
Absolutely. And I think a beautiful part of this is, I'm sure for you as well, already with the elbow, you can look back and have probably intense gratitude for that experience because you can already see the beautiful results. I can look back and say like, okay, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have chosen to be raped. I would not change it. I have so much gratitude for that experience because it led to so many beautiful things. And when we can look backwards in life and realize that, eventually I feel like we can learn slowly to find the gratitude even in the moments that at the time we would call hard or bad. There's still, the beauty is already there. And I feel like if we can learn to look for it in the experience, we get to access that gratitude immediately, which doesn't take away the intensity of that experience, but it's a more pleasant experience if we can find that gratitude there. And I think even in small ways, I love that you talked about that being spiritual beings having a physical experience. I say often that we are each an infinite autonomous being, and I extend that to my kids from the moment they're born. They're not humans who are loading into being full humans. They are already infinitely autonomous. And my job as a mom is simply to guide them on that path and to let them, as soon as they are able, have full access to their decision-making part of their autonomy. And I think I had trouble seeing my own infinite autonomy for a lot of years. And that in this journey, I've come to a place where I'm able to see my kids more deeply because I can see myself more deeply. And for people listening, especially if someone has been given a word of autoimmune disease or any of these things, you could probably feel the difference in your body even in just the contrast of hearing things like, my body is broken, I have autoimmune disease, my body is attacking itself. Like that to me has a feeling in my body. And if that's rewritten and then the experience becomes my body and its infinite wisdom is healing, I am and will be and continue to be healed. It feels so much more expansive in your body immediately. And even if you're kind of faking it till you're making it at first and you're just saying that internally and you don't really believe it, I found it does eventually shift. And then when that becomes the default software program, the body listens and that connection gets stronger. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness.
100%. And do all the things, just be present first.
Yes. Well, because what's the joke? It's like pre-enlightenment, carry water, chop wood. Post-enlightenment, carry water, chop wood. It's just the presence at which you're able to do that and what you're able to bring to it. It's not that your day-to-day shifts. It's not that you'll stop supporting your physical body. It will just become effortless to do that because the choices become so easy because they come from a place of sort of the uniting of all of the parts and from a place of self-love.
Two last things, and I'll let you go because I know you're a busy woman, and thank you so much. Am I too late? Am I okay?
No, I have plenty of time for you always.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, kids, I know, feel, and think. I changed my entire relationship with Silas last night, having been home only 24 hours, and we have had this particular dynamic, and it has literally been me watching me suffer inside his body of self-abuse and lack of self-love, which I literally stared at him. There was a whole scenario, but I mean, it ended with 20 minutes of eye contact without words until he watched me. He experienced me soften so he could soften. So we had an entire, and I am so connected to this kid and we are verbally attached and emotionally, he's the most aware, present being in my life. But he was in a cage. And I really feel the most powerful thing I've ever done in my life outside of birthing him and looking at his eyes was last night having 20 minutes at looking at his eyes and him and I really reconnecting in a way that assisted him to get out of his cage. And I'm very aware of that. And I saw the shift in him like still today. And I'm so grateful. To your point, I was grateful within an hour of breaking my elbow. I had 1 hour of anger and why and what the heck. And I've done this before. Why am I doing this again? And I literally said to the universe, can't I just like bend my elbow and put my shoulder back in place like in a quantum minute? Like, why do I have to do it? And I heard they won't believe it if you do it too fast. So I think I've done it as fast as possible in the human form for people to believe that it actually happened. I documented with x-rays and all the things along the way so people can believe it. But to my point with you, we have an opportunity to help our children to not go through the 20 years that it has taken us to get to where we're at. So please let's start taking be time with our children and teaching our children some be time instead of do time, because that's the real present. And Katie and I spoke about this before we started recording, that both of us this year have realigned to focus back on the most important thing, which is the family we created, and to enjoy the life that we've created instead of trying to save everybody else. Put the mask on ourselves first, like extend our life back to our life again now that we've got this. So this is a journey that we're all on together, and we're here for you. I'm here for you. I know Katie's here for you. And how can we help you? And once you start helping yourself, or as you're starting to help yourself, please go to these kids, because they have a lifespan expectancy that's less than our generation. And that's not acceptable to me. Is it acceptable to you? I think that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, that was actually part of how I originally started Wellness Mama, was when my oldest was a newborn. Reading that statistic, the study was reported in Time magazine that said for the first time in 2 centuries, the current generation of American children will have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. And I'm right there with you. That's not good enough for my kids. That's not good enough for anybody's kids. Our kids deserve better. And I think we are going to change that. I think we are going to see shifts. But to your point, I think the presence is so powerful. And the beauty of this, especially for any of the moms listening, in a really profound way, moms, I feel like, set the nervous system tone for the whole house. And our children actually don't have a fully separate nervous system in the first 7 years. They are extremely co-regulated with us. And if you've had a newborn, you've experienced that, where when you calm yourself, when you do the gentle movements and the shushing and actually all the things that help your nervous system, their nervous system calms down. And that's how they're learning their nervous system regulation to begin with. But it doesn't just magically completely go away when they turn 7. I'm sure any moms listening have seen that experience. If we're overwhelmed and stressed and busy and running, that transfers into the whole house, and everything feels more urgent, and everything ironically takes way more time to get done because we're all so stressed. But conversely, if we are able to cultivate even just a little bit more peace and joy and calm in our lives, kids are so incredible, and they're so aware. They sense that immediately. And so to the degree that we can cultivate that in ourselves, it will ripple out to our kids. And then, like you said, I love that. That's so beautiful, your experience with your son. If we can build even just 10 minutes of that presence with them, it's life-changing. And there's actually data to back that. Psychiatrists say kids really, they don't need our 24/7 undivided focus and attention. That would be counterproductive for them, and they wouldn't like it. They need about 10 minutes per day of one-on-one, me not on my phone. I am curious and focused and present and loving my experience of you. And just 10 minutes of that over the course of a whole 24 hours is enough to really help cultivate that connection and to help their nervous system feel anchored. So to me, that's great news, because as a mom, that's doable. Even with 6 kids, I can spend 10 minutes with each of them per day and make sure that I have that touch point. And it makes such a difference.
You're such a warrior. Every time I hear 6 kids, 4 kids, 3 kids, honestly, 2 kids. As a mom of 1, God bless every one of you and your vaginas. And your C-section scars. And go get my scar class. And Katie, you're going to have my scar class so that you know how to treat that scar at home, because that's important. I only treat your scar a little bit in person, so we got to do that again when we see each other. So anyway, God bless all you mamas out there who've had a watermelon go through a straw, or you've been cut open to have a child be born. Either one is incredibly courageous. And you might be a mom of a fur baby. You're holding energy and space just as much for everybody else. And you might be a mom of your mom or your dad or your brother or your sibling, and the feminine, the divine. You're a man. My husband takes care of our son way more than I do. I don't mean moms as a woman who's born a child, while I'm also respecting that. I'm also saying that every one of us has divine. And I love what you just said, because there is this connection that's tangible when the physical umbilical cord is there, and then that energetic umbilical cord is there to learn, model how to be this divine being and this physical being. Because I'm actually starting a new YouTube channel. How we doing at evolution of being divine in our physical bodies? How's it going? Because what I've seen on my table is it's going good. Actually, it's going better than it's ever been. But now we need to be more conscious of that's what's happening. And I was on a plane the other day, and there was this little tiny baby next to me. And I just was like, I really want to do this show. Like, it's been in my mind. But then I see this like 10-month-old baby who's like definitely not vaccinated, super aware. And just like you could see this baby starting to stand up and it's like wiggling its whole body. And it was like moving over here and moving around. And mom was so present and so with it. So adorable. And mom, I just looked at this baby and I was like, it's fun, huh? Like you're really trying to get that whole divine being to be in this body and going, oh, this is fun. Oh, look over there, look over there. It was like into the frequency of life. It was so adorable. And that innocence we all have inside of us. And we've forgotten that curiosity over judgment, which is one of our core values at True Wellness. And it became because I became so aware of the deep cord of judgment, I think is thread in society that we need to unleash to really be free. And therefore, we won't have judgments over somebody that thinks differently, looks differently, or is different than us, that they're shining their light in the way they want. Love on them. Good for them. Just because they're different doesn't make them bad. That's craziness. So, you're amazing. And I pray and hope and trust that everybody today has seen a different side of the amazingness of Wellness Mama Katie, and really been able to dive deep into their journey as you spoke about yours, to see the likenesses and know that they're not alone in the validation of where they're at. And I truly thank you for everything. And I want to ask you one last question on a doing side. What are your top 5 to 10 building that strong foundation for really optimizing your health in your daily life? You know, not like you get up in the morning and do these 6 things. I know you don't do that. Like you live your whole life this way as I do. So I'm just curious what your top, whatever you think whatever you want to share, top 5 to 10 things are that you do.
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate so much your extremely heart-centered and thoughtful questions. It's fun to get to talk about some of these things I don't normally talk about even on my own podcast. So this has been a very, very fun conversation for me as well. The cool thing on the health side, I think, again, me of 10 years ago would have given a much more clinical answer that was rooted in statistics and studies. And again, not that there's not value there. I think there is. There's just so much personalization and individualization when it comes to health and wellness. So I think there's that wisdom and learning to work with our own body to figure out our own N of 1, because that actually is the most valuable scientific study we could ever do, is that of ourselves. The cool part is my journey through every biohack and supplement and expensive protocol and everything I did, ironically brought me right back to the things that are almost either free or incredibly inexpensive and accessible to almost everyone. And I love that it took for me thousands of dollars and years to come back to we're meant to be in alignment with our nature and with nature. So what I often encourage people to start with as the foundation first, and if you're going to do the biohacky things or the more expensive things, they will all work better if you get this foundational stuff right first. Goes back to the simple ones that I know we've talked about as well, but getting your light figured out, morning sunlight, the signaling cues of bright midday sunlight, and the sunset. And if you're not doing that outside, creating that experience within your home to whatever degree possible, because we are light beings and we're incredibly influenced by the light. Even from an energy perspective, much less of our energy comes from the food we eat than we think it does. A lot more actually comes from our light cues and what's created cellularly in the body. And hopefully light is available to all of us on any given day, even if it's cloudy outside. Those light cues are so important and they're free. And there's 1,000 other reasons that are based in studies of the benefits of going outdoors as well. But even if you can just do 10 minutes when you wake up, 10 minutes at some point during the day, and then 10 minutes around sunset of light outside, your circadian rhythm will start to really entrain to that, and it makes a huge difference for sleep.
I know your lunar rhythm, your lunar answer. Yes. And go outside in the moon. 100%, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all the equipment, and I've come to the same conclusion. Most of what you do is freaking free and available all the time.
Yes, so
I love the first bio love foundational step. This is great.
Yeah, it's go for a walk outdoors. It's amazing what medicine it can be. Same thing with we've all heard the advice to hydrate. Agree, it's important. I feel like we missed for a while the importance of not just pure water, but water plus whatever minerals your body specifically needs. For me, on a personal level, actually adding salt to most of my water made a profound difference in my energy levels. And when we consider that the human body is an electromagnetic organism, it makes sense that we would need electrolytes for that communication to happen optimally. Same thing with my digestion improved because I was getting sodium chloride. Chloride is used to make HCl, which is helpful for digestion. A lot of us are supplementing that, but simply adding unrefined sea salt to our water sometimes can be great for increasing energy, especially if you find yourself not wanting to drink water. It could be your body telling you it actually needs more minerals in your water, not that you don't need water. And that one's, again, almost completely inexpensive or free from the nutrition side, where I used to come from literally spreadsheets, 500,000 line spreadsheets based on genetics to help dial in exactly what people should be eating. Now I just look at it from how can I maximally nourish my body and show it the most love in whatever food I'm going to consume over the course of this day? How can I choose the foods that have the most micronutrients, the most protein, the most of all the things my body needs, which I'm learning to even listen to more and more. So it's going to give me the answer. A textbook's not going to give me that answer. But I think that shift alone, if we can let go of calories and macros and weight loss and all the things we associate with food and look at how can I most nourish my body, the choices become so much easier because we're moving toward a good instead of away from what we perceive as a bad. And that's what I'm trying to also instill with my kids from a young age is no food is bad, no food is good. But your body's asking for certain things on certain days. So how can you most listen to your body and then most nourish your body with the foods you're going to eat that day?
Oh, God bless you for saying that. All the women and the men, please take a deep breath. That was huge. 1,000% agree. I call it flexitarianism.
I love that.
Be a flexitarian and listen to your body and be flexible to what it wants and stop judging it. It might want chocolate cake every once in a while. Now, if it wants chocolate cake every day, you might want to question who's in charge. But when your divine being's in charge, your divine being knows what you need. And sometimes you need comfort food, and that's okay.
And on that note, I think at the event where we met, there was somebody recording TikTok videos, and I got asked to be in this video. And the first question was, what are the 3 worst things we can put in our body? And I know that this person wanted me to say glyphosate or sugar or whatever it was. And I was like, fear, guilt, and shame.
I loved your answer. I was like, go, Katie. I thought it was so good.
Because I really do believe that if we are in one of those states, if we're afraid of whatever food we're eating, it could be the most nourishing food on the planet. It's still not going to affect our body in the most positive way because we are in a state of fear. Conversely, I think we actually get a lot more leeway if we're in those states of grace, ease, and joy, even just from a nervous system perspective, much less all the deeper energy levels that we've talked about in this episode. I think our body, in its wisdom, like you said, it actually might crave chocolate cake one day. And if we're listening, that's okay. If we remove the fear, guilt, and shame about that chocolate cake, we can have a blissful experience. And then the next meal, we might choose something else that our body wants at that moment. So that's what I've gone from a very complicated nutritional paradigm to how do I most love and nourish my body in this given moment, the present moment. The only moment we have is the present. I feel like sleep as a topic has been talked about so much. There's infinite resources for that go detailed on the specifics of it. But I think just if we can nurture good sleep habits and hygiene, it then becomes an effortless passive thing because we're going to sleep anyway. So if we can move the needle in a good direction, we get to have a high ROI from something we're already going to do. But what I feel like, and I know we're aligned on this as well, one that we miss, we talk about sleep. I've never had an expert ever in almost 1,000 podcasts say sleep was not important. Yeah. But I feel like in the modern world, we miss the connection aspect of the human experience in a lot of ways. We're technologically connected, but we miss the proximal connection to the people in our lives sometimes because of our technological connectedness. And my friend Lauren says humans are nutrients. And I think a lot of us in the modern world are deficient in that one. Even though we know that loneliness is more dangerous than smoking or never exercising or drinking, human connection is tremendously important. And it actually is the singular common thread in the blue zones. There is variation in their diet. There is variation in their movement levels. There's variation in when they sleep. But human connection is very strong in all of those areas. And so that's another one that I'm like, it's free. It doesn't take effort, but be the one who initiates community if it's not naturally happening. I think there's tremendous value in that as well. And then I think like all the things we talked about related to, go ahead.
I want to pause on that one because that's why I started the podcast. One, people didn't know how they were healing, right? When COVID hit, and I was like, the biggest problem is the worst thing you can do is separate humans. If you did that to rats, they would die.
You did that to babies, they would die.
COVID was, if you didn't understand what Katie just said, you did in the last 4 years because you felt it, and it was a felt experience when you couldn't connect physically and in space with other humans. It makes you feel like you want to die. Because I've never heard, and I love Lauren, whoever she is, that said that it is a nutrient. I love this. Human connection is a nutrient. And another deep breath. Katie Wells. Mic drop after mic drop.
Well, you asked such great questions. I absolutely loved this conversation. And then I think I would just wrap up by saying, to tie in all the mental, spiritual, and emotional pieces that we talked about, it's like I use as my barometer, am I able to choose, and not even have to choose, but experience grace, ease, and joy, and connection, and gratitude more in daily life than I used to. And for me, that's a win. It's not about perfection. It's not about never having a negative emotional experience. It's not about never having my physical body do something I wish it didn't do. It's about, does it become a more effortless, more joyful process to experience those states in connection with other people on a day-to-day basis. And so to me, when those things happen a little bit more naturally day by day, to me, that's the win. And ironically, it ties, for me, correlates super strongly to my body healing, to so many aspects of my life shifting. So I think that is such a valuable work that if we can do even slowly, will pay such dividends into all areas of life.
Heard 1,000%. Pray you all received that in your heart. Katie, you have exceeded not that I had an expectation, but this was a big honor for me.
Was for me as well. Thank you.
And I'm very grateful to having got to know you personally before we did this interview. You were on my list of people I wanted to interview on my podcast as like an unreachable, who's untouchable that I can actually touch. And it was such a divine moment meeting you that day as you sat so eloquently on the floor and we chatted. And I just appreciate you opening your heart to me that weekend and really getting to know you and being willing to open your heart as you did today and share such a beautiful perspective as I share with you 1,000,000% that perspective, and trust that those that have listened to the end will not only take this and embody this, will share it with those that need it so that you know all how to be free and know that you're not alone and know that it does get easier and it does get fun and it gets to the point where you're not in perfection, you're in curiosity. And the win really is that each day you can see you're a little more easy and joyful and grateful and winning because you're not in that negative, you're in love instead of fear. That's really what it boils down to. And truly, as Silas says, every time he kisses us, he puts it in his heart like that. And Katie, you're in my heart since the day I met you. And every one of you, I feel your hearts. That's my gift, is I feel and see people's hearts. And I want you all to know you are amazing divine beings. Catch up to that, however we can help you to catch up to that and get in this physical body and enjoy the ride and all the things that happen, because I promise it's for your best and highest good when you can truly trust it and love it. I don't know what else you could possibly add to today, Katie, but I just want to add that you truly have been exceptional today and bearing of your soul. And I know that's not easy for anybody. And I truly give you such gratitude and honor you in doing that, because I know that's a big deal.
Truly, thank you for having me and for asking such beautiful and hard questions. And I am so grateful for your friendship as well. I've thought so many times of how grateful I am that we connected at that event. And I don't even know that you could have known how healing that was for me as well, because in part of my healing, the story I talked about, all those emotional walls, I had special fears around relationships with women because of women who had hurt me in the past. And the past couple of years have been such a beautiful healing of that. And so to get to connect with another woman whose heart is so incredible, and I feel like you are such a beautiful voice in this space and help so many, I have such gratitude for your friendship. And so truly, it's an honor to me to get to be here today. And thank you infinitely for having me, and to everyone for listening. I appreciate you sticking around and listening to our conversation, and just an honor to get to be here.
Thank you. And from our hearts to yours, enjoy the Sound of Soul clip that will be attached here at the end, which is a musical rendition of our Entangled Quantum Hearts today in musical form, available for your listening pleasure and your heart-opening pleasure to know that your water inside your body received this. And so we love you. Have a great day, everyone.